Have you ever thought of making a weave end grain cutting board but felt intimidated because it looks complicated? Don't worry, it's a lot easier than it looks. In this video, I'll go through each steps, from the measurement and design layout, the 3 separate glue-ups, and applying the finish. Also, I'll share how I fixed my little router accident and share some tips along the way. This is Joe from Atilios Woodshop. Let's get started. After cutting the boards to 21 inches, I used a joiner and a planer to clean up the edge and the faces, and then rip them to 2 3/8 of an inch. Using a combination of the planer and drum sander, I dialed in the final thickness for both the cherry and the purple heart. The thickness of the cherry is 1 3/4 inches and the purple heart is 1/4 of an inch. Alright, so I milled everything to make 2 boards. This pile right here is going to be board 1 and this pile right here is going to be board 2. But let me bring you in closer and kind of give you an idea of how the design is going to look like and give you the dimensions for the cherry and the purple heart. Here's everything that we're going to need to make one board. I have 6 pieces of cherry and 12 pieces of purple heart. The cherry measures 2 3/8 tall and 1 3/4 inch wide. The purple heart are 1/4 inch wide and 2 3/8 tall. All of these were cut to about 21 inches long. Some of you might have already noticed that all the stalks standing vertically are taller than the ones laying down horizontally. That's because all of these groups need to be glued together like this. And I gave myself some wiggle room so that after glue up, because I'm sure I'm not going to do a perfect glue up, I have enough material to joint into plane, basically material to remove to make a perfect square afterwards. Because that's going to be the most important thing about this cutting board. We need to have a perfect square this way and this way for our second glue up. This is the first of 3 glue ups that we're going to do for this design. Make sure you use plenty of glue. I'm only applying glue on the purple heart because the cherry is going to be sandwiched between 2 pieces of purple heart. As you are arranging this, make sure the 2 pieces of purple heart that are touching each other does not have any glue. And don't forget to use cold so you can apply an even amount of clamping pressure, especially on the thinner purple heart pieces. So after letting the glue dry for about 24 hours, I'm going to remove the clamps and then I'm going to run it through the joiner to clean up one edge and maybe use the drum sander to sneak up to that perfect square that we need for the second glue up. And this is how it should look like after your first glue up. After cleaning up one edge with the joiner, I used the planer to sneak up into my final dimension. And as you can see, when I flip the alternating pieces, it looks very flat. Next, I'm gonna do a dry run on my glue up and clamp everything up to make sure that there are no visible seams between the pieces. Also, this ensures I have everything I need for this glue up. All the clamps, cauls, and whatever else I may need for this glue up. So after about 2 to 4 hours, after the glue gets very tacky, I like to use a scraper to go ahead and scrape the excess, and this is going to help with cleanup later on. I'll leave an Amazon link down below for this scraper or something similar and all the tools and consumables used for this video. Now that the glue has had a chance to dry overnight, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the clamps. And I'm gonna take my board and use the top of my table saw to figure out which side is the flattest, so I can use that side as a reference on either my drum sander or planer. So I decided to use my planer to clean up both sides. And when you're doing this, make sure you take light passes. You don't want all the hard work that you've done so far to go to waste because you got too aggressive and got to tear out or mess up the pattern that you were going for because you took too much material. For the next step, I'm gonna use my crosscut sled to trim one side of this board. After this is trimmed and squared, I'm gonna use the stop block to crosscut all my pieces. The measurement for this crosscut really depends on the final thickness you want to achieve. For example, if you set your crosscut to about 2 inches, you're gonna end up with a board that is about 20 1/8 long by 15 5/8 wide by 2 inches thick. And since I made 2 exact same blanks, I crosscut the other one to about 1.6 inches and ended up with 2 smaller boards, as you'll see later. All right, now for the exciting part, the reveal of the pattern. So it's time for the third and final glue up. I made sure I have everything ready. I did a dry run to make sure there are no seams between each block. And if you are using these pipe clamps right here, make sure you use blue tape like I did over here so that it doesn't leave any stain on your cutting board. I have my clamps ready, I have my glue ready, I have my collars ready. All right, so let's get to it. Off the clamps, the glue up went perfectly, so I don't need to use my router sled to flatten this board. Instead, I'm gonna go straight to the drum sander and get both sides sanded so we can finish this one up. So here are the boards fresh from the drum sander. As you can see, I made 3 different sizes. One for brisket or ribs, one for ribeyes, and then one for everyday use. Next step, I'll be sanding from 80 grit all the way to 180, and then I'll route the edges and route the grab handles. For the juice screw, I'm gonna go ahead and hit that easy button and use my CNC. I have tried doing it by hand before and royally messed it up. I already marked the center of this board, and the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this V-bit to mark the center on the CNC, and then I'm gonna switch it out to this 1/2 inch ball nose bit so I can set the depth and cut the juice screw. To route the edges, I'll be using my palm router with this wood grain junky router base plate. This setup is easier for me to control than handling these boards on top of my router table. And I tried this small board on my router table and I ended up getting a little bit of tear out on the purple heart, which I had to go back and fix with a palm router. So I'll be using this setup and let's route the edges. This setup is what I use to cut my grab handles. I'm using a 3/4 inch ball bit, and as you can see, I have this fence right here that is being held down by these two hold down clamps, and I have a stop block on each end. I'm planning to cut a 5-inch grab handle, so the board width is about 13.5 inches. So all I had to do was add 5 inches, make it 18.5 inches, and then divide it by 2. So that's 9.25 inches, and use that measurement from the middle of this bit to the end of this block. So 9.25 from here to here, and 9.25 from here to here. And that's gonna give me the 5-inch grab handle that I'm aiming for. So yeah, no matter how much you plan, things happen. And I thought I tightened this, which this is tight, but it's not clamped down underneath the table. So as you can see, this moved. And as a result, the fence drifted as I was cutting it. I don't know if you can tell right there. That looks terrible. So I am not cutting a juice groove on this one. I'll probably run it on the table saw and just taper the whole bottom to get rid of this ugly router mark right here. But I'll continue to route the other two boards and hopefully I don't mess those up. For the angle of this cut, I just eyeballed it and took light passes until I got rid of the router marks, and then cut that same angle on the remaining sides. After the fumble yesterday with the router table, I had to set the board down and called it a day because I was not having it. I was getting pretty heated. And this morning I used the table saw to get rid of the router marks, and I think it turned out pretty great. Just like one of my favorites always used to say, we don't make mistakes, we have happy accidents. Take a guess who that is. After I have sanded everything to 180 grit, I'm gonna use water to raise the grain and then do my final sanding. If you don't raise the grain before your final sanding, your board is gonna feel like you're petting a porcupine the first time you wash it. So make sure you don't skip this step. Time for my favorite part, applying the finish and watching that grain pop. For the finish, I'll be using this food safe mineral oil, and I'm gonna let it soak for a few hours on both sides. After that, I'm gonna seal it with this board wax. All right, that's it. If you found the video useful, leave a like and subscribe. Until next time, see ya.